Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen, as the case might be. Welcome or welcome back, again, as the case might be. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I'm the founder of the Summit Leadership Alliance and host of these TechTonic Conversations. Conversations we are bringing to you on topics relevant to tech-curious audiences, enterprise technologies, founders of technology companies, and so on and so forth. Today, on this fine Monday, February 17th, I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome back Minister Nate Glubish, Minister of Technology and Innovation with the Government of Alberta. Minister Glubish, thank you so much for finding time to be with me and our audience today. It's a pleasure to see you again.
Thanks so much for having me back, Dalibor. I enjoyed our last visit, and there's been a lot happening since we last chatted, so it's timely for us to
It
pick up where we.
certainly has been. It certainly has been. And what we wanted to do today is to talk a little bit, actually, to talk a lot about Alberta and Alberta's tech promise. And of course, who's better to tell us that story than the minister responsible for technology and innovation in our province? And for those of you who might not know, actually, I am very proud Albertan and Canadian. These two flags behind that have been telling that story for a number of years now. Minister Glubish, what I was hoping to do today is to actually, first and foremost, hear your personal story. If you don't mind telling us a little bit about who you are and what your life and career has been to actually lead you to this position where you are now in. And then I wanted to have a little bit of an arc of the story, talk a little bit about the history of Alberta in the context of technology, maybe reflect on where we are at today as a province, and then most importantly, where do you feel the opportunities are for us going forward? So with that, I'm going to also remind the audiences that this is indeed a live conversation. So please bear with us if we have any technical challenges. That said, the session is being recorded and we will soon post it on the YouTube channel TechTonic Conversations. But this also gives you an opportunity to submit any questions you might have for Minister Glubish, leveraging the Q&A function of this Zoom platform. So with that, Minister Glubish, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you navigated your life and career to now be leading the Ministry of Technology and Innovation?
Sure. Well, thanks, Dalibor. So I can tell you first of all that getting into politics was never part of the plan. I didn't go to school thinking someday I want to get elected and be a politician. Quite frankly, I went to business school. I did a finance degree at the University of Saskatchewan,
Yeah.
and uh, loved studying finance, loved the sort of the math behind business, the math behind investment, and just learning about how do folks and firms make decisions about how to deploy resources to go and put them to their most productive use and to build something exciting. And so then after I finished my university training in 2004, I moved back to Alberta. I was born in Edmonton, so this capital region has always been home to me. And so I started my career as actually an analyst for a venture capital fund called Foundation Equity. And, at the time, there was not a lot of venture capital action happening in Alberta, but we were one of maybe two funds were actively investing in Alberta tech companies at the time. And, it was a great opportunity for me just to learn all about how a tech sector kind of works. How do you go and find good deals? How do you do due diligence on a tech company? Because it's very different than, say, on a traditional business. And just, learn by doing. And over time, after making, a number of investments into Alberta tech companies, helping to build them into successful enterprises, I worked my way up to partner in the fund. And so I spent the better part of my 15-year career pre-politics, investing in and building Alberta tech companies. Over time, I moved around a bit, worked with a couple of different funds, most recently with Yaletown Partners,
Yeah.
leading a
Yeah.
lot of their Alberta investments. And so, I can tell you, I've seen a lot since 2004, over the last 20 years, 21 years, in Alberta's tech sector, how it's grown, how it's changed, and I got to say that has got me quite excited. And I know we'll talk a bit about this in terms of where we're at today. So, but coming back to sort of my personal arc, So did the stint in VC, did a few years doing mergers and acquisitions for an industrial company headquartered in the capital region, helped them buy about 8 or 9 companies across North America, double in size, and then ultimately sold it in a private equity recapitalization to TriWest Partners out of Calgary.
Mhm.
And then after that, went back to the venture business for a couple of years, and ultimately did end up running in the 2019 election, and was elected then, and have been serving in the Alberta legislature ever since. But so to your original question, how did I make that transition from
Yeah.
business to politics? What was the spark? I guess what was the inspiration to make that change? I mean, obviously, folks who are watching this will know that I'm a part of the governing party. I am a conservative. I'm not going to go on a big, long political rant, but like all Alberta conservatives at the time, I was frustrated with the government of the day between 2015 and 2019, and I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to present an alternative to Alberta. So that was part of it. I mean, I'd be lying if I said there wasn't
Yeah.
a, 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 a political perspective where I disagreed with the government of the day. And rather than complain about it, I just decided to do something about it, get involved, and present an alternative to the public. But the other half to that, though, I mean, that's not the whole story. The other part of the story is that, I had spent my career investing in and building Alberta tech companies. I had seen the power and the possibilities of tech done right and done at scale. And, really felt that Alberta had a lot of the building blocks to become a globally respected tech hub that folks from all around the world would want to be involved in. People would want to come here to study with some of our leading researchers. People would want to come here to invest their capital into building Alberta tech companies. And I thought to myself, we've never really had anyone in government who comes from the tech sector, somebody who has an investment background in the venture capital space, someone who has the stripes on their back from things that didn't quite go according to plan, and the lessons learned that comes from that,
Yeah.
but also folks who have wins under their belt to say, you know what, I actually helped turn a company from an idea into, $250 million. That was one of my successes, was a company called Circle Cardiovascular Imaging out of Calgary. Invested them in 2010, and just last year or a year and a half ago, they recently sold to a private equity fund for $250 million. So, I thought to myself, imagine if the government of Alberta had someone elected and in the government who could bring that experience, that lived experience, to the table, and also bring their network, a network of investors from all over North America, a network of innovators and successful tech founders who have built something substantial, and a network of tech entrepreneurs and mentors, and all the different folks involved in the tech sector that help to make innovation happen. If someone had that network and that experience, what could they help to do to shape public policy to make Alberta an even more innovative and attractive jurisdiction? And so that was a big motivator for me, is I had seen the power and the possibility of technology. I was inspired about the opportunity to help bring that forward for the benefit of Albertans at a scale never before seen.
Yeah.
And so, one thing led to another, eventually was elected, and over time just built my own reputation among my colleagues, among 2 different premiers. And now here we are as the Minister of Tech and Innovation. I'm in a pretty unique position to leave my mark on the future of innovation in this province.
It's a pretty elegant fit between your direct experience and the mandate of the ministry. So very, 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 very cool, actually, that it played out the way it did. So, Minister Glubish, when you maybe we can reflect, and you started mentioning, the situation in Alberta prior to your arrival. Maybe we can reflect a little bit on the history of our province in the context of technology and tech ecosystem. Everybody would recognize Alberta as a resource-based economy, right? We're rich in energy, natural resources. How about technology? What was that history?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not, I won't presume to be an expert in everything that's ever happened in Alberta,
Of
but
course.
I can walk you through sort of my perspective as an investor who had been investing in Alberta tech since 2004. And what I can sort of say generally, or what I would say generally is that we've always been innovators in this province,
Yeah.
always. You know, even in the founding days of our oil and gas boom and sort of discovering those resources and then starting to become a world-class developer of natural resources and an exporter of natural resources. You know, Alberta has a reputation at being one of the best in the world at the responsible development of oil and gas resources. And that's because Alberta entrepreneurs in the oil and gas sector saw problems in the field every day and decided to figure out ways to fix them.
Yeah.
And they created new technologies. They may not be like fancy software AI technologies, right? This was 30, 40, 50 years ago. But they found ways to develop new tools, new technologies. And out of that came all kinds of supporting businesses and creating more jobs and attracting investment and building Alberta's economy. So we've always had a long history of innovators seeing problems, being creative, working hard, applying that entrepreneurial spirit, and using innovation to create technologies and tools that solve problems in new ways. We've done it in oil and gas. We've done it in agriculture. We've done it in forestry. We've done it in so many different traditional industries.
Mhm.
So it shouldn't come as a surprise that we also are, yeah, we also have pockets of world-class innovators and researchers in more emerging sectors. And you know, I mean, AI is all the rage today. That's what everybody's talking about. The advent of ChatGPT and all the large language models that have come out and what they're able to do. That has dominated a lot of the public discourse on technology, you know, around the kitchen table. But you know, Alberta's been investing in AI since long before it was cool. I mean, as a province, we started what is now known as the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute in the early 2000s. And we've put
Yeah.
you know, millions and millions of dollars of funding into that. We recruited Dr. Richard Sutton to Alberta, who
Yeah.
is known as one of the godfathers of AI. He literally wrote the book on reinforcement learning,
Yeah.
and people come from all over the world to study under him, to collaborate with him, to work on research with him. Um, and so he's been here in Edmonton for over 20 years. And that's just one example of many that I could list. So over the last 20 years, we've been building this critical mass of research and technological development that has put Alberta on the global on the map in a global sense. Like we're one of the top three or four researchers in the world in terms of the quality and the frequency of our research publications. So again, transitioning from oil and gas and traditional
Digital
sectors, but
sector.
now also into the innovation space, we are recognized as world leaders in developing AI-based technologies. So you know, I've kind of seen that arc transition to where we've started to build some significant critical mass, whether it be in AI, whether it be in life sciences, whether it be in you know, robotics. There's a lot of different sectors in our segments of our tech sector that Alberta is really hitting it out of the park in terms of quality of technology and research. In terms of other measures of success, though, I mean, like again, when I first got my start, there was very little investment into actual companies. So we were good at building technology, and then it all just got exported
Yeah.
and
Please.
absorbed into American tech companies.
Yeah.
So that's not actually really good for Alberta. It's great for our reputation as the birthplace of technology, but it's not good for our citizens because we're not getting the lion's share of the economic potential of that. It's all being commercialized in the hands of American companies. And now we've made some good progress because one of the concerns I think that led to that export of the technology is that it was hard to find access to capital to grow and scale your company. And so we've done a number of things over the last number of years. We've really doubled down on the Alberta Enterprise Corporation, which is our venture capital fund of funds. over the last. This is an initiative that I think has it was started under the PC government. It was kept under the NDP government, and it's been re-upped by our United Conservative government. So this is not a partisan issue. That folks on all sides of the aisle see this as a great initiative,
Yeah.
and that has put between the 300 plus million that the government of Alberta has put into that fund, and then you add to that all the investments from their other limited partners, they've actually invested well over $1 billion into Alberta tech companies. And so that's helped significantly increase the momentum. So we've gone from, I'll just give you a stat, 2017, $30 million was invested into Alberta tech companies.
2017, 30 million.
And
Okay.
then you look at just a couple of years ago, I think it was, I'll be plus or minus a year on this, but I think it was 2022, we were 729 million. So that's some pretty good progress in a
That's it.
relatively
Yeah.
short period.
Wow.
And we did that at a time when the Canadian market was on the decline by about 30%. So Canada was going way down. Alberta was bucking the trend, going way up. And since then, we've had 2 solid years of 700 to 800 million in investments. So that's 3 years running of 700 or more, all at a time when the Canadian market has been on the decline.
Yeah.
So we have made some significant progress on the access to capital front. And now, for the first time in my life, we see a dozen companies that were born in Alberta that are tech companies that are now worth $1 billion. So we call that a unicorn, right? We never used to have unicorns. They always used to leave. Either the company would leave or the technology would be sucked out to a different company, and then it would become a unicorn and a big success. Now we have them here. We've got companies like Adabotics on the robotics side. You've got companies like Neo Financial, who are a fintech completely transforming transforming the traditional banking sector with a digital banking alternative. You've got companies like Jobber in Edmonton, who've created some really outstanding tools for traditional contractors, small contractors, to simplify their billing and their quoting systems. And so all of these companies have really made some great progress. Jobber just raised over $100 million recently in their most recent financing. Neo Financial just announced a blockbuster deal with a little over 100 million in equity, but several hundred million in venture debt as they've been scaling up. So we're starting to see some really exciting stories in Alberta's tech sector that speaks to momentum in investment, momentum in access to capital. Always more to do. We're setting our sights on more growth from here. But again, to your original question, where did we start and how have we been doing? What's the progress in Alberta's tech sector been? The progress has been good. The momentum's all headed in the right direction. There's never been a better time to be in tech in Alberta than today. Yeah. And I think we're just getting started. So in terms of where we need to go, now what we need to do is make sure that companies like the ones I just mentioned, that the billion-dollar unicorns, that they don't feel a need to leave before they become a $50 billion success story. So how do we get the next Shopify or the next BlackBerry from an Alberta company?
That's right.
That's my goal as innovation minister, is to make sure that some Alberta tech companies could reach that level of success while still being headquartered in Alberta, hopefully still having a significant Alberta presence on their cap table as investors and shareholders, because that's where we'll unlock some of that significant benefit for Albertans. And we can also speak maybe a little bit to what the ripple effect is of having a $50 billion tech company, because it's not just about one company being successful. There's some really exciting ripple effects that happen for the benefit of the tech sector as a whole once you've got one of those sort of anchor companies. So we're trying to focus on what are the things that we need to do as a government to ensure that the dozen or so tech unicorns can make it to that next level of the 10, 20, $50 billion valuations. And then how do we also grow from just 12 of those companies to maybe 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 of those companies? Because that's where we'll really start to see, a productivity improvement in our province. We'll see significant economic uplift for the benefit of all citizens. And we'll see a significant diversification in our economy. We've been headed in the right direction on diversification, but I always say there's always room for improvement. We can always do more.
You paint a really exciting story, and the picture. It sounds that it was really a combination of, first and foremost, very just natural entrepreneurship of people who live here, who have been, you know, solving problems for different industries since Alberta was Alberta, right? So we had a fertile ground of entrepreneurs. I think that one important thing that you mentioned Amy, the machine learning institute that Alberta has been investing in, first under the University of Alberta umbrella and now as a separate sort of institute. But that has been a steady investment that goes on for a couple of decades now. And that has been riding on top of academia, which is really world class, both in Edmonton with the University of Alberta and Calgary, and then our polytechnics. So it feels to me like the ground was fertile. The ground was fertile. What was missing is access to capital. And then what you just described is over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, that access to capital became much easier. So now it feels like that everything now has been connected. We are getting right. The moment is ours now to grasp, right? So
Yeah.
maybe let's talk a little bit about now, what's happening now, and where do you see those opportunities for Alberta to just explode further on the world's tech stage?
Well, I think there's a couple of angles that we could talk to, that we could approach that question from. Um, and one we haven't really touched on yet, and that is, we've talked a lot about the innovation side of my file, uh, the venture capital side, the tech commercialization side. We haven't talked as much about the technology side, which is the running, essentially the technology backbone of the government, the
Mhm.
technology that facilitates the delivery of all government services. If there's a computer, if there's a network, if there's some software that powers the delivery of a service, chances are my department is in charge of that. Um, and so one of the things that I'm really focused on as Minister of Tech and Innovation is how do we use more technology and innovation in everything we do in government so that we can deliver better, faster, and smarter services to the public in a way that feels familiar to them, right? I mean, folks are very used to using their mobile phone for almost anything nowadays. And, they know what a world-class app looks like on a phone. So how do we give them an option to use a tool like that for more of their interactions with the Alberta government? How do we give them more online options, choices? And how do we make sure that those are designed in such a way that they look and feel like a best-in-class application? So we're really pushing to take that to another level. And I think you're going to see a few things coming up over the next year or two that will speak to that. And then we're also just in terms of behind the scenes trying to make sure that we're implementing better tools. So we recently hired a new deputy minister for tech and innovation. His name's Janet Galford. He comes to us from FinTrack from Ottawa, and he was their head of AI. So this is a guy who has got a real world experience at building actual technology applications himself. He's got a number of patents to his name. He's built some open source platforms that he's just published and made available for anybody to use. And he was leading the implementation of AI at FinTrack to help deal with all the important work they do to deal with, protecting against money laundering and uh, all the important roles that they play to protect the country against some shady bad actors. And he's hit the ground running, helping us to say, well, there's a lot of ways we could use AI inside of government. Um, and one example would just be, as a minister, if I need a briefing note, I ask my chief of staff, who asks my deputy minister, who goes down the chain to assistant deputies and down the chain to executive directors and managers, and they start this long chain reaction of queries to go and pull together all the most current information on a topic. All that information's in the system.
Yeah.
Why can't I, as a minister, just go into like our own proprietary Alberta GPT and say, what's the most up-to-date briefing materials on topic X?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
just have it auto-populate. I mean, how cool would that be?
Hmm.
And how much time would that save? First of all, I would get the information instantly instead of waiting 2 weeks for a briefing note.
Yeah.
Second of all, there'd be dozens of people that don't have to touch that request. So that will free up hours and hours of their time for every single request that I make.
Yeah.
So that's one way to help, just on a smaller scale, make the public service more efficient. If you think about, every minister in government asking for every briefing note they've ever needed, and they could have it at their fingertips at any given time, that'd be pretty cool. And it's not rocket science. The technology exists.
Yeah.
We just need to build our own in-house, secure, sovereign AI platform, host it in our own data center, and train it on all of our materials, and then facilitate a minister like myself being able to just query the system.
Yeah.
So that's one thing we're working on. There's a number of other applications we could use just to make the inner workings of government run more smoothly. But one that I'm really excited about is on the procurement side. And I know some of your listeners had some questions about
Yeah.
procurement and how might we be able to do more business with local tech companies. Um, so one of the things that I'm really passionate about is how can we as a government become more of a customer of local tech? And I'm mindful that yes, we still have to be compliant with our international trade agreement commitments, but I really believe that excuse of trade agreements has been used as a crutch for far too long to say, oh, we can't do that, we can't do that. I think that if we instead look at what are the reasons why local tech companies have not been successful at doing as much business with the Alberta government, and ask the question that way, rather than saying, let's just do more business, let's just give all of our business to Alberta tech companies. Instead, we say, well, why is it not working when Alberta
Yeah.
companies want to bid? And I think some of the answers to that is the RFP process takes way too long. On average, it takes us 7 months to procure anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
In some cases, it's even longer. And then the process itself is so complicated that, it's almost uh, like it's a mountain that most small businesses can't climb.
That's
They
right.
can't have 2 or 3 or 4 personnel full-time equivalents just working on responding to
Absolutely.
RFPs like the big multinationals do. And so they often just have to be like, you know what, I either can't apply or I can just maybe spend an hour off the side of my desk and try and apply and hope for the best. But, you know, the system's not designed for that to be a success. So how could we think differently and how could we use AI to do it? And so this is something my deputy's been working on for me that I'm really excited about. And so think about it this way. There's two sides to this. There's how do we generate an RFP?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then how do we facilitate the applications from the businesses who want to do business with government? So let's talk about the first one first.
Yeah.
What if we could use an AI engine that we've built to streamline the generation of an RFP so that you could say, this is what I want to buy. This is what I care about. And just interacting with it conversationally, just as a layperson to say, this is what I need.
Yeah.
And letting the AI translate that into an RFP that is trade agreement compliant, that reflects what it is you actually need and care about,
Yeah.
that can automatically also scour all publicly available information about the topic to say, this is what we know about best practices and who are some of the best players and what have they done and what are the lessons learned and how do we what would constitute a responsibly crafted RFP that protects the interests of Alberta taxpayers to make sure that we've followed due process, but that also makes sure that we've been clear enough to send a signal to the market. What exactly do we want? And make it easier for the applicants to put a strong bid in because they know exactly what we want. One of the problems with RFPs is we're often way too vague. And so people are guessing at what do you want, and that's not a recipe for success. So imagine if we could automate that so that anybody in government could automatically generate an RFP in minutes that is higher quality than something that normally takes months.
Yeah.
That would be pretty cool. And again, automatically enforcing trade agreement compliance so that, if there are things that need to be there so that nobody can come back and challenge the award later, then let's make it super easy for all involved to know what they're getting into. We also do need to think about like why do we always craft an RFP with such strict requirements? So, like, why do we make it such a high bar for someone who's maybe not yet done business with us to do business with us the first time? Because so many of our RFPs are crafted with these artificial high bars saying, well, you need to have done dozens of these projects before, because if you haven't, then you're not good enough for us. I reject that premise. That's not true. And I would love to see some of these RFPs being done in such a way where, okay, maybe if we're a little bit saying like, well, these guys haven't proved themselves the same way some of the big, consulting firms have. Well, okay, then let's say you get a provisional award that says you get to do a pilot, and so long as you meet these milestones, then you transition into a full award. Like, we don't have to go and take a chance
I love that.
at scale with somebody completely new, but we should absolutely be willing to take a chance with somebody new, because if we never try somebody new, we're always going to get the same mediocre results and the same high cost results. There's no competition from the fast, nimble, innovative upstarts if we make it impossible for them to even get a chance to show us what they're made of. So I think that's less a technology thing. That's more of a principle and a policy thing that I'm trying to move forward. And I think we're going to try and test that at least on some technology procurements that T and
Yes.
I, the tech and innovation as a department, has the authority over. And then add to that the automation on the RFP generation. That could become a very strong recipe for success to lower the artificial and unnecessary barriers for smaller and medium-sized Alberta tech companies to have success in putting a strong application forward. But the second half to that then is, how do we make it easier for them to apply in the first place? What if we had an AI augmented online platform that folks could go into and, first of all, subscribe to saying, I want automated alerts on anything that looks like this. So they
Yeah.
can say, this is what I do. This is what I'm interested in. This is what I'm good at. Here's all
Mhm.
the proof of what I'm good at. Tell me whenever there's something relevant. And AI can help parse that out and notify them immediately. And then when you decide, hey, yes, I want to apply, it could automatically populate your application, link your website, link your white papers, link your marketing materials, link your existing customers and maybe even some of your existing contracts, or link any kind of information and upload it into this portal. And it could automatically parse out from that your application in minutes. Like,
Yeah.
AI can do this.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
We just have to design a system that is tailored to facilitate this process. And so this is one of the things that we're working to build to test inside of tech and innovation so that the small guys could say, I only need to spend 20 minutes on this. And it will be a world-class application that is consistent with anything that the big multinationals could have put together.
Yeah.
And so now it's a democratization of procurement to make it fair and equitable access. So everyone has equal opportunity to show what they're made of. It's still a meritocracy. You've got to prove that you are good at what you do, and you need to win on the merits of your application. But we eliminate the artificial barriers that I think have not served Alberta taxpayers well. They have not facilitated proper competition at scale in the marketplace. So if we can fix that, and we can go from 7 months to 7 days for a procurement, how
Yeah.
cool would that be?
I
So
was
this,
gonna say, like, what you're describing. This is not improvement. This is exponential transformation. This is like
yeah,
you're not shaving 10% off the process or 30% of the process. You are radically rethinking how this actually works.
we're
And
looking
you're
to
absolutely right. Like,
for
how
that.
many small companies can afford to participate in a 7 month long process, for goodness
They
sake,
can.
right?
I talk to them. I talk to companies like that every day who just say, I wish I could do business with the government, but I just can't play in the world of your procurement system. The procurement system's broken. Well, here's the good news. I agree. The procurement system in its current form is broken. And so what I've shared with you today, hopefully it gives some of your listeners some hope and some optimism that we're taking some real action for the first time in a generation to re-engineer this process. And I firmly believe that by doing this, it's going to make it so much easier for Alberta tech companies to do business with the government. And we don't have to do it in a way that breaks our trade agreement obligations. We just need to lower the barriers that are artificial and unnecessary and use technology to facilitate a simpler process. And why does this matter? Well, I'll put my VC hat back on for a second. What was one of the things I looked for in a tech company that was asking me for money? I mean, obviously, I want to know what is your technology, what is your product,
Yes.
what's the market that you're trying to go after, and why are you the best at what you do, blah blah blah, all those obvious things. But one of the things that spoke volumes to me, that was a proxy for all of the other questions we would ask, is who are your customers? Because who knows you and your technology
Exactly.
better than the people you're building it for? And if they're willing to vote with their wallet and say, I like this, I need this, it solves a pain point for me, and I will pay for it. As an investor,
Hmm.
that's the magic right there. That's what tells you this is probably a good company, a good team, and a good technology, and something that I might want to be involved in as an investor to help to get it off the ground. So, as a government, if we could think about how can we become a customer more often of Alberta tech companies. I mean, we have lots of problems we need to solve that need technology to be a part of the solution. There are lots of brilliant innovators in Alberta who can help us get there. So if we could find a way through improving our procurement system to make it easier for those folks to do business with us, then it's going to make it easier for those companies to raise capital. It's going to
Of
make it,
course.
they're going to be able to spend more of their time building their technology and less of their time spinning their wheels trying to raise capital. So, in fact, looking for ways to make it easier for the government to be a customer of Alberta tech companies can be even more powerful of an economic development tool than government grants and investments because
Absolutely.
because you are paying for a product that you want,
Yeah.
which solves the company's cash flow needs in the short term. You are validating the technology by being a customer, which increases the odds that the entrepreneur can raise capital from venture capital funding. And as a result, you increase the chance that they will be able to focus all their creative energy and their innovative capital into building the technology and scaling the business. So I think this is something that we have not yet done, but we are working towards that I think could take what is already a positive momentum, a significant positive momentum in Alberta's tech sector and take it to a whole nother level.
Fantastic. Absolutely. So thank you very much for sharing this. This is actually very, very exciting. I know that you are also big proponent of solving for the IP question. And we've discussed a number of times now the importance of making sure that IP stays at home. I'd love if you could sort of give us a little bit of a reflection on how you think about it. What might be some concrete, specific ideas? Why is that a good thing?
Yeah. So IP, intellectual property, this was the core of, what a venture capital investor cares about, right? What is proprietary about
Yeah.
what you're building? What is it that you can do that nobody else can do? Whether that's a black box, sort of trade secret, or whether that's a patent or a portfolio of patents. What is your IP strategy? What is proprietary about what you do? What makes sure that as you become successful at scaling this across the world, that nobody else can come and eat your lunch and take this away from you? And I think this is an area where all of Canada has been a little bit weaker. Our country has been great at birthing brilliant researchers or attracting brilliant researchers from around the world to call Canada home, to call Alberta home, and to apply their skills to develop new technologies, whether that be pure research, whether that be applied research, whether that be turning it into spin-off companies. We're really good at getting really exciting world-class research off the ground. But as I mentioned earlier in our discussion, where we fell short is that most of that got sucked up into American companies before we could realize the full potential of that technology in the hands of Albertans and Canadians. And this is a problem we need to solve. And there's a lot of folks, I think, advocating for this. This isn't just my idea. This really first crossed my consciousness thanks to the important work of the Canadian Council of Innovators,
Mhm.
led by former Research in Motion founder Jim Balsillie,
Yeah.
some of the great folks at CCI who have been saying, look, you know what? Yes, Canada has a productivity crisis. You wonder why? It's because we haven't been good at securing intellectual property from the research that we are funding, and we're letting all of the highest value product that we create, which is the technology, get sucked
Yeah.
into the biggest economy on the planet, the United States. And they pointed out to me, for example, like too often, you know, provincial and federal governments in Canada would say, "Oh, look, we just signed a great deal with some big household name American tech company, and they're going to invest, you know, 10, $20 million into our university, hire a bunch of researchers. Yay for us. We brought 10 or $20 million into our tech sector." And, at face value, that sounds great. 10, $20 million that came from outside of Canada to come into Canada, great. But when you sort of think another level deeper, what does this mean? It
Yeah.
means the smartest researchers in our institutions, in our universities, are working for an American company, and all of the intellectual property they create is going to accrue to the value, to the benefit
Mhm.
of that American company's shareholders. We're not creating IP for the benefit of Canadians. We need to completely change how we think about this. And so, I'm grateful to Jim Balsillie and to the Canadian Council of Innovators for really trying to push this agenda in. They've been going to every province and, of course, talking to the federal government, trying to advance this. And what I want to tell your listeners is that in Alberta, we're in agreement with what these folks have been pushing for. We need to think about how do we be more deliberate about creating IP and creating patent portfolios that will deliver value for the next generation of Albertans. And that can look like a few different things. In some cases, it might mean
Yeah.
that when we are funding research that has this type of promise and opportunity, that we first of all, we should be making it a criteria of success to say, are you developing patents around this to protect your research?
Yeah.
And what is your strategy to build a portfolio of patents so that, if we're developing the next generation of AI technologies, because a lot of the foundational work of neural networks was born out of Alberta, and I think also a bit out of some of the other AI institutes in Montreal and Toronto. But a lot of that foundational research came out of Canada, but all of the patents are held by the Googles, the
Yeah.
Meta, the big, the big trillion-dollar tech companies south of the border. So we need to start thinking about, if we're going to invest in the research and fund these institutions, criteria has got to be, what's your patent strategy? What's your intellectual property strategy? How do we build something that's Canadian, something that's, and of course here in Alberta, in the Alberta context, how do we build something that's Alberta IP? And if Alberta taxpayer dollars went into it, maybe the Alberta government, as a steward on behalf of Alberta taxpayers, needs to have a stake in that IP, so that over time, eventually the Googles will say, well, we're going to need that technology, but we're going to say, well, we own it and we'll happily license it to you and you can use it, but you got to pay us for it. And all of a sudden that can start to become a permanent royalty stream. Hey, we're very familiar with the concept of royalties in the context of oil and gas. Why are we not thinking of our intellectual property, our intangible assets, the way that we would the assets that are in the ground, and say, how do we structure this right from, like, by design, right from the beginning, to say, we want to create a permanent revenue stream for the benefit of Albertans to allow us to continue funding more research and more innovation and more productivity and more exciting advances, innovative advances. This is something we need to be deliberate about. So we're going to be working on a bit of an IP strategy here that says, what is the role for the government as, partly a funder in the research, and partly,
Mhm.
in some cases, a funder through Alberta Enterprise as a VC fund of funds, partly through Alberta Innovates with some of our grants and support programs. How do we make sure that anybody who's getting any taxpayer dollars for any reason for innovation has a very concrete IP strategy on how they're going to develop intellectual property, they're going to protect it, they're going to patent it, and then the next level is, in what circumstances does it make sense for the Alberta government to be a co-owner in that intellectual property? And in what circumstances does it just make sense that what role should we play in trying to make sure that the spin-off companies that commercialize this have as much Alberta investor content as possible? And I think if we get that right, we will stop this modern version of the brain drain. We're not losing the brains. We're losing the product of the brains.
Yeah.
And so it used to be that all our smartest people would leave, and then we stopped that. We fixed that. But now our smartest people are exporting their brain power to American companies. How do we fix that? How do we make sure that we're instead of building technologies or technology companies that get bought and absorbed by American companies, how do we build the multi-billion dollar successful tech companies that will be the buyers, the acquirers of other patent portfolios and other intellectual property being created, and helping to consolidate that into Alberta tech superpowers? That's how we move the needle to a whole nother level. That's how we go from 700 million a year to billions a year in investment. That's how we go from 12 tech unicorns to dozens of tech unicorns. And that is my vision for an Alberta that has reached its full innovation potential.
This is actually a superbly compelling way to think about it. And we are all familiar with the brain drain mechanic that we were faced with. And I mean, you're right. We have successfully, as Canadians, managed to stifle that to the degree. But my aha is that, well, the brains might be here, but what the brains come up with, it's still seeping, right? That is such a powerful and refreshing, quite frankly, things to hear from you. So what we discussed so far in terms of what Alberta is doing, um, so IP policy and solving for IP, keeping the ideas at home, being more open to local Canadian and Alberta businesses, and being easier to interact with, and using it as another lever to grow the tech ecosystem and ultimately grow prosperity. You mentioned leveraging AI within government to make government more optimized, more effective, more efficient, more, I guess, intuitive and seamless for consumers. You also mentioned Alberta Enterprise Corporation as the funder of funders, like the VC of VCs. Are there any other important elements of your policies um, that we should highlight for the audiences? This is already big.
So, I think maybe this is a good segue into talking a little bit about the infrastructure behind AI.
Ah,
In other words, AI compute or AI data centers.
yes.
Anybody who's been sort of following me on LinkedIn or following the work that I do, you've probably heard me talk a lot about um, the fact that we believe Alberta has a compelling story for AI data center infrastructure. Like we can be we are a very attractive destination for that investment in that infrastructure. And so how does that tie into all the other things we've been talking about today? Um, and why are we paying attention to it as a government? I'm happy to maybe shed a little bit of light on that. So for me, this all started about this time last year, maybe about 11 months ago. I went down to California for an AI conference that was hosted by a group. It was the Stanford Digital Economy Lab, MIT, and the University of Toronto. So a few hot spots for some really bright research in AI. And they convened a room full of all the smartest people from all the hyperscalers, all the big tech companies that are building, the household name AI
Yeah.
models that we all hear about every day. And they brought a bunch of economists and a bunch of just really smart people. And I was the only politician in the room, and I was surprised. Like, why'd you pick me to come to this? But they liked the fact that I was a tech minister, focused a lot on AI and looking at ways to use more AI in government and looking for ways to facilitate more adoption of AI across the board. And so they said, well, you might get some value to this, and why don't you come along? So I was grateful for the invite. And I remember at the time, the CEO of Anthropic, Dario, I forget his last name. He was telling a story about how, the year previous they'd spent a billion on AI compute infrastructure for their cloud, models. And and then this, he said this year, so that would be now last year. So the year before, 2022, they spent a billion. Then this year, 2023, they spent a billion. 2024, they were spending 10 billion. And then the next year, now 2025, they were planning to spend 100 billion. That's what he said. And that was the first time that I'd ever heard anything about scale and like just the context of how big this was, that one company was going from a billion to 10 billion to 100 billion. Like we're talking 10x twice in a row
Yeah.
for investment into compute infrastructure. And that this is what was necessary in order to be able to train a world-class series of models. And that sort of got the wheels turning for me. And then later, I learned that Microsoft was going to spend 200 billion in a single year on AI compute infrastructure. And then I also learned that Google, out of all of their data center infrastructure that they have company-wide, only 10% of it is being used to run all of their products. So that's Gmail, Google Search, all the advertising, YouTube, you name it, all their tools. Only 10% of their compute is used to power that. The other 90% is being used to develop AI. Um, that was the aha moment for me of like, okay,
Wow.
this is
Yeah.
big. It's only going to get bigger. Um, and so I started asking all these folks like, well, what is it that you need in order for this type of infrastructure to get built at scale fast enough? And what I quickly learned is they'd already used all the low-hanging fruit of grid-connected electricity.
Yeah.
There was no more grid-connected electricity available to build this infrastructure at scale. So they were now looking to say, where are the places where we can get net new power generation built alongside of the data centers at the same time? And how do we do this at like a gigawatt at a time? Not just like 50 or 100 megawatts at a time, but 1,000 megawatts at a time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I realized that really what they cared about was access to reliable electricity at scale and speed to market. Those are the only two things that really mattered. And I thought to myself, wow, Alberta can solve both of those problems. We are a pro business, get her done jurisdiction. We have a culture of red tape reduction. In our first term in government, we reduced red tape by 33%. And in those 4 years, we saved Albertans and Alberta businesses just about $3 billion. So we have the best credibility in any government in Canada on being pro-business, get her done. Let's help make it easy to get answers from government, to get permits to build something. And then we have access to virtually unlimited natural gas resources.
Yeah.
And we have decades of expertise in developing that into power generation. So if we could couple the red tape reduction spirit with the abundant access to natural gas power, we could build thousands of megawatts of infrastructure. And I don't mean we like the government could build it, but I mean we as a province could create the conditions to encourage this type of infrastructure to be built at scale quickly. And so I started testing with people. I said, well, did you know this? Did you know about our gas? Did you know about our track record? Did you know about, our appetite to be a pro-business jurisdiction? And everyone said, well, that sounds great. I want to learn more. So I came back, I pitched it to the premier. I explained to her why I thought this had an opportunity where we could bring tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars of investment to Alberta and create tons of jobs and create a bunch of vital, critical AI infrastructure that is going to be underpinning the economy of the future. We could have it local in Alberta. So she liked the idea and let me run with it. So we developed our AI data center attraction strategy. I've been down to Silicon Valley 4 times last year to promote our desire to be a destination of choice. And now we've got about a dozen different projects proposed in Alberta that would total over 10 gigawatts of energy infrastructure. Maybe not all of them will go ahead, but I mean, in less than a year, we've gone from just discovering the opportunity to now being a leading jurisdiction of interest to
Yeah.
the proponents. And so we're just trying to put forward a clear strategic direction to the market to say, if you try to do this here, we'll work with you to try and help make it easy. I've set up a concierge team that works with all of the credible projects to say, we will help you articulate your project and engineer it so that it's like super clear what you're trying to do. And then we will work with you when it's appropriate. We'll bring energy in to talk to you. When it's appropriate, we'll bring environment in to talk to you. When you need to talk to electricity, like affordability and utilities, we'll bring them in. If you need some help on with any government department, we'll bring the right decision makers into the room at the right time. Because if you don't have to spend 2 weeks spinning your wheels wondering who am I supposed to talk to before you actually talk to them, and then you can save a couple weeks, dozens of time throughout the process. We can save you months, if not a year or more, in the overall process. And what I told people is I said, we all know, we all can agree that time is money.
Yeah.
Let us give you the gift of time. If we can give you the gift of time, we can make your project more viable and make it more attractive. And what we're hearing from folks is the work we're doing on that front is very attractive. So I'm optimistic that over the next couple of years, we'll likely see some significant investment and infrastructure built out of AI compute in Alberta. And why should Albertans care? I guess that's a good question. Like, so what? If this gets built here, why does that make life better? Beyond just saying yeah, there's some investment, there's some construction, and then there's, these data centers doing all this computation. Why should I care? Well, first of all, it will mean an increase in domestic demand for natural gas, which means more natural gas gets produced and consumed locally,
Yep.
which means more royalty revenue to the province, which means more resources to pay for things like healthcare and education, which we all care about.
Yes. Great.
So that alone is a good upside. And when you look at the scale of the projects we're talking about, it's completely within the realm of possibility. We could be talking in the 50 to $100 million range in the not so different future of regular annual incremental royalties. That's money that wouldn't
Incredible. It's
to
incredible.
Alberta services. So that's one option or one way in which this can benefit Albertans. And the way I like to look at it is to say, well, if Justin Trudeau and Stephen Guilbeault can stop us from building pipelines to get products to global markets, they can't stop us from taking gas, converting it to electrons, and converting those electrons to ones and zeros in a supercomputer at scale, and exporting those ones and zeros through fiber. We
Yeah.
have the fiber.
Yeah.
So this is a way for us to export the value of natural gas without actually moving the natural gas
Hmm.
out of Alberta. So it's a creative way to get around the anti-energy policies of the current federal government administration. So maybe a lot of Albertans wouldn't feel like this AI conversation relates to them, but most Albertans are very proud of our oil and gas sector. And most Albertans are frustrated that the federal government has stood in the way of us developing those resources and getting them to global markets. This is a way to do that in a way that the federal government can't stop us. So that's another angle that I like to use to say, if you care about Alberta's energy sector, this is good news for you. But it's a way to lift up that oil and gas traditional industry while also creating a whole new tech element to our economy. And that to me is pretty exciting. But why else should you care? Well, it comes back to some of our conversations about technology in general. I always say that technology is not just an industry, it's the future of every industry.
Yeah.
And the most exciting advances in technology today are powered by AI. That's just, I mean, like think about what are the coolest technology stories you've all heard of in the news over the last year? Almost every single one of them is AI related. And so some of the most exciting advances in medicine, in healthcare, are going to be powered by AI. It's going to be new diagnostic imaging tools that help to automate part of the manual workflow of our most expensive specialists so that they can see more patients in a day for the same amount of money. They can deliver faster diagnostics to their patients, giving them peace of mind and certainty sooner in the process. They can do it with greater accuracy.
Hmm.
Like this is now possible with AI at scale. We're going to take some of our most brilliant researchers who are studying new therapeutics, new drugs, new treatments. People like Sir Dr. Michael Houghton, who is the only living Canadian Nobel laureate in the
Yeah.
field of health, who's at the University of Alberta doing tons of exciting drug development research. He's the person who discovered Hep C. His research in the past has saved millions of lives around the world, and he's right here in Alberta developing some revolutionary new um, uh, treatments for all kinds of illnesses. That if we can get those across the finish line, you know, either you yourself or someone you know and love and care about will have a better and longer life because of the work he's doing. But he's one person. Now imagine what you can do with AI, where you can take the skill set of someone like that and you can replicate it 10 million times inside of an AI compute facility and set it to work to automatically look at millions and millions and millions of molecules and compounds to tackle different illnesses. And then you take the 10 or 20 most promising results from that AI process, and that's what the Nobel laureate actually physically works on himself. You can make him millions of times more productive. This is what the power of AI brings to an industry like healthcare. And it's going to do the same thing in robotics. It's going to do the same thing in construction. It's going to do the same thing in manufacturing. You name it, AI is going to transform every industry exponentially. And so why does it matter that we want to have this infrastructure, this compute infrastructure built in Alberta? This is critical infrastructure. Just the same way that pipelines are, just the same way that electricity, power generation, our electricity grid is critical infrastructure, so too is AI compute infrastructure. And it would be to Alberta's advantage to have a high proportion of the North American critical infrastructure for AI compute to be domiciled here in Alberta, because then we will know for sure that we will have reliable access to this infrastructure, and it will create a ripple effect. So you will see robotics companies popping up and, purchasing that compute and then using it to transform their industry. You will see healthcare companies and life sciences research outfits coming and locating in Alberta to access this compute. And that is the sort of order of magnitude, next level of economic benefit that Albertans will see and feel if we are successful in attracting this investment. So that's why we're putting a lot of my time and energy into uh, planting our flag and clearly telling our story. We've got a great story to tell. No one's going to tell it but us. So let's get out there and tell the story. And
This is fantastic.
so far it's having great results. So, stay tuned. And I think the next couple of years are going to be pretty
This
exciting.
is superbly exciting, and um, thank you for bringing up that and closing that loop about this being an opportunity for Alberta's energy sector to actually deploy and grow within the province, to leverage within the province, given that we all know historically Alberta has been challenged significantly to export our energy, let alone to the world, even across Canada. So what a brilliant way to close that loop. So thank you for sharing that. Actually, to be honest, I never actually thought of it from that perspective. Now that you mentioned it, it's so self-evident and so obvious. We've all heard, I think most of us have heard, Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful, and his big ambition. Can you tell us a little bit more about like where that is at?
Yeah. Well, look, first, let me just say, look, I know that, if we were to poll everyone who's watching your webinar today, probably half the people will love him and half the people will hate him. That's fine. Like, that's fine. The fact is, Kevin O'Leary has a huge following. He's very influential, and he can convene people from all around the world to focus on solving a problem. And that's what he's done in this case. So he, like the Alberta government, like myself, has seen the power and the potential of AI data center infrastructure and the related power generation infrastructure necessary to support it. And he wants to play a role in helping to develop that. And he was working on some possibilities in the States. And, when he learned about what Alberta's value proposition is, he got quite excited. So just like we've met with about 10 other serious project proponents. We met with him and his team. And I would say they're one of the top three in terms of their seriousness about moving forward with developing some infrastructure. They're doing a lot of their due diligence and engineering work right now.
Yeah.
They have a parcel of land in mind that they've got an option on up in the Grand Prairie region in northern Alberta. And they're very excited about the natural gas um, resources, the expertise on being able to get that to site for a power generation facility. They're doing a lot of the work on designing the power um, the power plant that would support the data center. They're looking to do it as an off-grid system, so there'd be no impact to reliability or affordability of Alberta's core
So
electricity
that's
grid.
important.
It,
That's
it,
important.
it's
Yeah.
super important. Actually, it's something I forgot to mention earlier. We've made it very clear to all the folks who want to build this infrastructure. We said, you can build this in Alberta, and we will help work with you to get you to where you want to be. But one line we will not cross. We will not let anything happen that would harm the affordability or the reliability of Alberta's grid.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why we like the concept of these off-grid projects, like what the O'Leary Group is proposing. So they're building their own redundancy into their off-grid power system, so that they wouldn't need to tie into the grid. And
So
that,
how I'm understanding the strategy is that big data center projects welcome, but you will build a power plant next to it.
yeah, well, and our premiers use the language, bring your own power.
Yeah.
So, um, and whether you're going to do a behind the fence off grid site like the Wonder Valley proposal from the O'Leary Group, or whether you do want to be tied into the grid for whatever reason, for redundancy, or maybe you want to be tied into the grid to sell excess power onto the grid. All of these things can be done. Some of them have trade-offs. If you want to be tied into the grid, it's going to cost you more money because we would need, as a province, or I should say, the electrical system operator for Alberta would need to ensure that there was additional capacity being built to ensure the redundancy that you need, without compromising affordability or reliability to Albertans.
Yeah.
The only way that we can accomplish that is if you pay for that incremental infrastructure. So you would need to bring your own power if you want to be tied in the grid. You would need to bring your own power if you want to be off grid. The off grid is a little bit simpler from an engineering perspective and from an approvals perspective, compared to if you want to tie into the grid. So what we're saying is all things are possible in Alberta, but there's trade-offs. So what's more important to you? Do you want to be fastest to market? Then you might want to choose an off-grid
Yeah.
solution where you build in your own redundancy. If redundancy and security of the grid is more important to you, then it's going to take longer and it's going to cost you more. And you might say that that's okay. That's what we care about. That's what we value. So again, as a government, we're all about choice. We just want to make sure we design those choices in a way that there's no risk to affordability or reliability of the grid, and that then we work closely with the project proponents to help make it easy and straightforward to navigate that process. So coming back to Wonder Valley, I mean, they're doing all the engineering, they're doing all the work. We've got our concierge team working with them every day to help them articulate their proposal, to figure out when do we bring energy in, when do we bring environment in, when do we bring utilities in. And as a result, we're able to save them a boatload of time. And they love that. That's what, I mean, you've heard Kevin O'Leary talk about how happy he is in dealing with the Alberta government. I think
Yeah.
it's not by accident. This stuff happens by design. We're being proactive.
Yeah.
So is it a done deal? No. But are they serious? Absolutely. I can tell you when I look at the people that they brought into their team, they are serious. And if they get their engineering across the finish line, if they get their approvals across the finish line, I don't think they're going to have much trouble securing investment to get this built out. Um, but just again, just to remove any question that your listeners might have, just like we're working with the O'Leary Group, we're working with about 10 other projects doing the exact. I've got this concierge team set up in my department, and they are focused on working with every serious, credible project proponent for AI data centers and the related power generation infrastructure. And we work with them every single day to help simplify and make more straightforward the regulatory process for them. And the feedback I'm getting is folks find enormous value in that. So we don't
Well,
need to subsidize this. We don't need to do tax credits. We will not do tax credits. We will not subsidize this. We don't have to. We're giving people the gift of time. Time is money. And we are also giving them the gift of reliable, scalable electricity.
yeah,
Um, that's what they care about.
and reliable partner, democratic system in the province, stable government, climate that is conducive for the type of processing data centers need to be in, right? Colder climates, access to water. Like to me, what you're describing here, we could be at that precipice, Leduc number one again, right? Leduc number one again, the rediscovery of a whole new set of natural resource opportunities to propel us into the 23rd century, not 21st century.
Well, that's
Uh,
certainly that's what gets me out of bed every morning to work on this is I
I
really
love this. I
magnitude of
love this.
opportunity is huge.
Yeah.
But again, it doesn't happen by accident. We've got to do this by design. We have to do it the right way. If we do it the wrong way, it either won't work or it will have negative side effects.
Yes.
We're not going to let that happen. We've got our A team on this,
Yeah.
and we're going to make sure that we get this right, so that all Albertans see the benefits.
We have a number of questions coming from the audience. By the way, many of them are showing of their virtual thumbs up and saying kudos, good, great stories to hear. Um, the energy source of energy. You mentioned this is natural gas. Of course, we have natural gas. Sherilyn asks, are there any other considerations as a source of energy like geothermal, and might I add nuclear as well?
Yeah, so we've put a lot of thought into this, as you know, everybody who's in the space has been and looking at this. Um, I'll talk about the nuclear first. So on the nuclear front, absolutely, there's a future for nuclear to be a significant um, part of the solution to powering data centers at scale. But nuclear facilities take at least 10 years to get approved and to build. So you've probably seen a lot in the news about a lot of the big hyperscalers who've made some long-term commitments to some significant nuclear infrastructure. But that's not going to come online until 2035. What are they going to do between now and then? They need scalable, reliable power until then. And so that's one of the reasons why natural gas is such a significant short and medium term opportunity. 10 years from now, you probably won't see as much new natural gas facilities being built for data centers. Because by then all the nuclear stuff that's been initiated now will be coming online. But until then, there is a huge opportunity. On the geothermal side, I I, I have yet to find anyone who can, in a cost competitive way, deliver the reliability and scalability that's required. You look at the Wonder Valley proposal from the O'Leary Group. They're proposing to have 7.5 gigawatts of power generation for about 5 gigawatts worth of AI compute infrastructure. It's just I don't think you can get that type of
Yeah.
scale geothermal today. But I mean, Alberta does have some world-class geothermal technologies. I mean, you look at what Evor has done. It's pretty exciting, and so we're following these folks very closely. I will say I know that the O'Leary folks are exploring geothermal to power all of the non-data center electricity requirements for
Right,
their
right,
for their
right.
camp. That's still a work in progress. We'll see if that ends up working out. But so that's one option to say how do you use this for the stuff that's not required for the actual AI compute load. But look, if any of your listeners know something about some geothermal technologies that could do this, could do a gigawatt at a time and have 99.999% uptime, I'm interested to learn about it. So
Yes.
we're always keeping an open mind about what's possible, but to date, the most credible the most credible electricity modality is natural gas.
Is natural gas, and it sounds like we have a window that's about a decade long window,
Mhm.
and now is the time to act. We gotta be quick
Yes.
because the window will close as nuclear pops up elsewhere, we now have the opportunity to bring this home.
But I think what maybe if I understand correctly where the question was coming from too is there a role for nuclear in Alberta for these two? And I would say we're very open to that. Our Minister of Affordability and Utilities is leading our government's work on developing a regulatory framework for nuclear energy in the province. So we're certainly paying close attention to this and looking for ways to see if nuclear power infrastructure can help Alberta reach its goals of growth and industrial activity. Um, so I would say stay tuned. Like we're not ignoring the nuclear options. It's just right now on the data center file, I'm focused on what do I got to do over the next 2 to 5 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And then in the meantime, as my colleague Minister Newdorf works on the regulatory framework for nuclear, we can make sure that that's something that can be developed in parallel. And if there are some interesting projects that come from that, we'd certainly be open-minded to looking at them.
Um, Thank you very much. This was actually really valuable, and I'm really glad that we touched on this topic. I think this could be really transformational for the long-term direction of our province and ultimately our country. A country which finds itself in a very interesting moment with the new administration in the United States and this discussion on tariffs. Uh, we did get actually a number of questions in preparation for this conversation, asking you like, what do you see as an impact of these potential tariffs? How are you thinking about them? What do we do about them?
Yeah. Look, this is front of mind for all Canadians right now, certainly for Albertans. And you know what I will admit I've learned a lot over the last month or so about the position we find ourselves in and what do we need to do about this? How do we position Alberta for the best possible future in light of some of these threats, this trade war threat? What I've learned, or would say, what we've learned, thanks to the diplomatic efforts of our premier, is that there's sort of the U.S. is looking at sort of two. There's two separate initiatives here. One is the short-term, immediate focus, and that's all about fentanyl and unsecure borders. The U.S. has a legitimate concern that Canada's border has not historically been controlled well enough. And so we're not catching the flow of fentanyl across the border, and we're also not catching the flow of folks who are not here legally crossing the border into the U.S. We don't have as strict controls on who comes into Canada as the U.S. has coming into the U.S. And then we don't have strict enough controls at our borders to ensure that to give the Americans confidence that there's not folks crossing over that intend to cause harm to America. I understand where they're coming from. If I were in their shoes, that's something I'd be frustrated with too. They've been very clear they want us to fix this. And that's where the initial threat of the 25% across the board tariffs came from. And it was only when Canada finally said, okay, here's what we're doing about the border. We'll appoint a fentanyl czar who's the single point of contact for dealing with fentanyl. We will put, a couple $100 million into a fentanyl task force and an intelligence division focused strictly on dealing with this. And we will bring some additional border infrastructure to the table that the Trump administration said, okay, all right, we'll give you a 30-day reprieve. We'll wait and see, are you going to follow through? And I think it's going to be super important for our federal government to follow through on those commitments, because if we don't, I think we're going to find ourselves in a very painful position. Um, and look, to the folks who say, well, we're just a fraction of the fentanyl crossing the border compared to Mexico. Well, but that's because the Mexico border is much more closely guarded, so everything gets caught. Not literally everything, but a larger share of what's trying to go across the border does get caught. So it would make sense that the stats will show a larger quantity. In Canada, it is so easy to cross the border into the U.S. Illegally. And so a lot of this stuff doesn't get caught. But what the Americans do see is they see several fentanyl super labs that have recently been shut down in Canada, like massive facilities that are clearly not designed for domestic demand. They are designed to export into the US. They are seeing significant money laundering activity in Canada that has been allowed to persist under the current federal government. Very, very obvious examples of the BC casinos that have been found to be laundering millions and millions of dollars for drug cartels. Um, you even look at the U.S. division of TD Bank having to pay a $3 billion fine for having blatantly um, broken anti-money laundering rules. So you see this growing trend. The Americans are seeing, well, in Canada, it's super easy to get away with organized crime. You've got entire provinces legalizing hard drugs and a federal government that is supporting that. And so they see Canada as a threat. And so we need to respond and address that. In Alberta, we've been very focused on this. We've taken a very different approach on addictions and mental health than other provinces, and we've beefed up our own border with some significant provincial resources. And I think as a result, we've been able to send a strong signal to America that we understand where you're coming from and we're taking your concerns seriously. I think if the rest of the country does the same thing, then we will overcome this immediate threat of the 25% tariffs. The second sort of midterm challenge that we need to navigate is the overall renegotiation of the CUSMA trade agreement, the
Yep.
Canada, US, Mexico agreement. And Trump has been very clear. There's a number of things he's not happy with. He's not happy with the banking industry. He's not happy with, the dairy industry. He's not happy with the airlines. There's a number of things that he has signaled that he has concern with. We're, as a country, going to need to have some conversations about what do we want to do about this. But if we want to survive the short-term threat, to get to those negotiations, we need to first deal with the border and the fentanyl concern. That'll buy us the time to have the more diplomatic negotiations on the broader, comprehensive trade negotiations. But the good news is we have a lot of what America wants and needs. Despite some of the rhetoric and despite some of the claims otherwise, America needs our energy. If they want to be an energy dominant, an energy exporter, they will require our energy in order to be able to do that. Whether it's the electricity that Eastern Canada exports down into the East Coast, whether it's the oil and gas that we export down to
Yeah.
to the Texas Louisiana refinery corridor, they do need that. They can't retool their refineries to get off of our heavy crude overnight. That'll take years, and they can't afford to turn it off. So we do have some bargaining power there, and we need to, we believe as a province that being diplomatic in that approach is going to be best in the long run. That's the approach Premier Smith has taken. But I think the biggest takeaway for me, so we've talked a little bit about the short-term threat and the midterm CUSMA renegotiations. I think the biggest takeaway for me is shame on us as a country for letting ourselves become so reliant on the US.
Yeah.
We've been sleepwalking into this for decades.
Yeah.
And Alberta has been saying, hey, we need to build east-west critical infrastructure to get, yes, our oil and gas to global markets, but other logistical infrastructure like railway infrastructure and whatnot. We've been saying we need to build bigger, better trade corridors across the entire country so that every province can take whatever it is really good at, whether it's oil and gas in Alberta and agriculture products in Alberta and Saskatchewan, potash from Saskatchewan, uranium from Saskatchewan, whether it's the aluminum and other critical smelting and steel manufacturing from Quebec and the Ontario area. Like Canada has so much to offer, but we've shot ourselves in the foot by saying we will not allow east-west infrastructure to be built, and thus we will shut ourselves off from global markets. The single best defense we would have had in the face of the Trump tariffs would have been to say, well, we love doing business with America. America is our closest friend and neighbor. But if you feel that strongly, we do have global markets who will pay us full price for our resources, and we have the ability to get these products to market. So if you insist, we'll do business with these folks instead. If you change your mind, you know where to find us. That would have put us in a position of strength. So what I'm hoping will come from this is that Canada will have an honest conversation about how do we grow up as a country and how do we build critical nation building infrastructure to ensure that we are never subject to this type of threat from the US or anywhere. And knowing that we maximize our options to getting whatever it is that we build or develop or export, getting it to the global markets
Yeah.
at the best possible price for our citizens. I'm hopeful we'll get some more pipelines built in the next several years. I'm hopeful we'll get more critical infrastructure built. This is the most important takeaway that needs to come from this tariff conversation. And I'm hopeful that despite the short-term pain we might feel through some of the uncertainty, that in the long run, we will become stronger as a country for it. That's what Alberta's pushing for. That's what our policy is. That's what we're advocating for. And we stand ready to lead the country in accomplishing these goals. We invite our partners across the country to join us.
Well, thank you, Minister Glubish, for mentioning this. Um, as a matter of fact, if I might remind everyone who is listening, our country became the country that we now recognize because of the nation building project that was undertaken 150, 130 years ago with Canadian Pacific Railway, right? That is what connected the country from coast to coast. So I am, what you're saying actually is a music to my ears, and I'm hopefully to music to many, many who will listen to this conversation later. Uh, what might be on our way to realize this potential for Alberta that you described in terms of technology, tech future, data center capital of the world, perhaps? What could be on our way?
What could be on our way
Yeah,
or in our way?
in our yeah, sorry, in our way. What could be those obstacles and challenges that you feel we need to be aware of, that we need to be overcoming?
Well, I think first of all, we need to be willing to dream big as a country. And I
Yeah,
think I've offered a couple of ways in which we could do that. I'm not saying I have all the ideas. I'm always open to hearing other ideas. But I think the nation building infrastructure, transportation and economic corridors that would include pipelines that go east-west would be a critical part of that. I think developing some, LNG facilities on both coasts will be critically important. And I'm sure there's lots of other examples of some of that nation building infrastructure. I think critical minerals is going to be a big part of it too, because all of the electronics and robotics and all of this stuff, it's all going to be dependent on access to critical minerals. And right now, China dominates a lot of that supply. So Canada has an abundance of these resources. Some of them are a little hard to get to today, but technology is getting better every year. So we're going to need to have a plan on how do we play a role to maximize the value for our citizens on developing those resources. And let's not just export the raw materials. Let's look at ways to develop those materials into something high value and export that instead. And maybe along the way, we develop some intellectual property that's owned by Canadians
yeah,
uh, and create an entire industry around that. I think we need to be thinking big around some of those types of plays. And then we need to be willing to work together as a country, not stand in each other's way. And yeah, you know what? We might have some political differences from the west to the east. We might have some differences of opinions of what our first choices would be on what we'd like to see. But the fact is, if this country's going to work, we got to find some compromise with each other and say, okay, if Alberta's going to have some of this oil and gas getting to global markets, how does that help the steel industry in Quebec and Ontario? How does
yes,
that help, other industries? Maybe, if we can get some stuff shipped to Eastern Canada, then they can develop some refineries and then ship some higher value products around the world. Like we can all benefit here. So let's start talking about how do we all benefit instead of just saying, I don't like what one province is doing. That doesn't fit my ideology. Well, if we want to have a strong country, we might need to look a little bit past our own ideology and look to find some common ground to build from so that everyone in this country can benefit.
yeah.
That I think will be important. I think the one of the biggest things that we really need to think about though comes back to that intellectual property conversation. If we forget and if we lose sight of the importance of developing proprietary intellectual property that is protectable, that building patent portfolios, then it doesn't matter how good we are at something, doesn't matter how world class our expertise and talent is. The largest value that comes from that talent will accrue in the hands of international, like multinational large corporations, for the benefit of shareholders that are mostly outside of Alberta, outside of Canada. So we got to get serious about a plan to say, how do we teach and train our innovators to have a strategy about building a patent portfolio, building IP, and protecting that IP? And then how do we make sure that we're commercializing that IP and keeping as much of the ownership of that in the hands of Albertans and Canadians as possible? If we get that right, we will be stronger in the face of any threat, whether it be a trade dispute with the US or who knows what the next threat is on the global stage. If we get this right on the IP front, we'll be much stronger for it. And that will be good news for all of our citizens.
Yeah. Yeah. We are at the moment of crisis, and we cannot afford to miss this opportunity that this crisis has created. Hopefully, what has been occurring in the last couple of months has jolted Canadians into action. And I love hearing actually what you have said, Minister Glubish. Thank you very much. I agree 100% that the new battleground is the battleground of intellectual property, intellectual capital. That's where I think the future will be won or lost. And as we just heard, Canada and Alberta has all elements in place to allow us to win. It's just a matter of us choosing to collaborate, choosing to bring this together and to rocket fuel us. Minister Glubish, this was a wonderful conversation. As a matter of fact, although we certainly are in an interesting moment of crisis, I feel very optimistic having heard your talk for the last hour and a half. And I'd like to thank you very much for that.
Well, thanks for having me. I certainly share that optimism. Look, nothing worth doing comes easy. In the words of the famous songwriter Bruce Cockburn, Canadian songwriter, nothing worth having comes without some kind of fight. You've got to kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight. That's been an inspiration to me since I was in college. And I think we're at a point where, yeah, where we need to get to, it's going to take a bit of fight.
Yeah.
If we keep pushing, if we keep kicking at the darkness, we'll find the daylight. And you know what? We'll come out on the other side stronger for it as a country, as a province. And I'm very optimistic that our best days lie ahead.
What a wonderful way to wrap up this conversation, Minister Glubish. On that note, thank you very much. Hallelujah is all I can say. This was really inspirational. Thank you very much for sharing this with us. And for the audience members, of course, this will be shortly available on the YouTube channel TechTonic Conversations. Please plan to join me tomorrow. We're going to be highlighting two of our Canadian tech startups and scale-ups. Please visit the LinkedIn channel, register for them, and join me tomorrow. Minister Glubish, thank you so much again, and have yourself a wonderful Monday afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
All the best. Bye-bye.